Thank you, Laura. Putting Mandy on the spot like that takes the pressure off a little bit, which is nice. I'm really excited to be here. Laura did embellish a whole lot on all of those stories, but yeah, feel free to come up and we can talk about it. And if any of those things interest you, I'm happy to talk about them. I'm going to talk a little bit today about Transamerica's journey from a sleepy, stuffy life insurance company to what it is today, which is a better, sleepy, stuffy life insurance company. But first, let me start with, and Terry knows this all too well, Terry from Transamerica. I like physics analogies, and I think they can apply to a lot of different areas of the world. There's a concept in quantum physics that suggests that every particle has an antiparticle that has equal mass but opposite charge that is capable of annihilating that particle. The analogy is that in Transamerica, we found that building a culture of innovation, while a great thing, everything that we build has this really nasty potential antiparticle that, if left untreated, could potentially annihilate all of the work and the benefit that we generated out of it. So I can't promise that's my last physics analogy, but it's my best one. So let me jump into it. For those of you, I never set this up. That was the problem. What's this thing? I'll start by introducing Transamerica a little bit. I don't expect that you necessarily know who Transamerica is. This should work soon. There we go. But you might recognize the Transamerica pyramid in the background of this picture. We have a building that we own in San Francisco. I don't believe we have any employees in the building, but we do. We are officially in the real estate business by ownership of that building. And it has become the icon, and it's our brand, and it's what people associate with Transamerica. This has become more clear for the employees of Transamerica over the past 4 years, but prior to 2010, I didn't view myself as a Transamerica employee. Transamerica is actually not an American company. We're owned by the Dutch. There's a company called Aegon in the Netherlands who owns Transamerica. And in fact, up to 2010 or so, had compiled 25 companies within the United States that they were just sitting upon and grabbing their cash and reinvesting the cash from these companies into multinational investments that were better for Aegon than they were for what is now Transamerica. Transamerica from the 80s, when it did have a brand, was one of those 25 companies. And in 2010, just coming out of the global financial crisis, Aegon decided to allow the Americas to brand themselves in the Americas as Transamerica. So these 25 companies started to become one. The problem was there was very little rationale given for the change. So the communication channels across the pond did not exist. All of a sudden, we started to see organizational announcements, site closures, name changes, companies shifting ownership, people getting laid off, everywhere. And there was no rationale provided for all of this change. Thankfully, in the division that we work in, which is the Life and Protection Products division, we had a CEO who was a little insulted by all of this, and he was a bit of a visionary, and he decided to lead his division through this change. So despite all of the uncertainty, he made a declaration that the Life and Protection division of Transamerica would not be a cash cow. In fact, it's going to outpace the growth of the entire life insurance industry. It's going to do that through innovation, and the way that that's going to be done is by building a culture of innovation, collaboration, and trust within life and protection. Flash forward a couple years, Terry was in the room. We were trying to dream up a way of engaging employees in a culture of innovation. This was early 2012. Neither Terry nor I could list all of the locations that Life and Protection Division was located in. And in the course of the coming 3 months, we would have to visit each and every one of those and enlist all of the employees to be part of this culture. So needless to say, none of the employees knew that they were part of Life and Protection. They didn't know they were part of Transamerica. There was no relation there. So I'm going to talk through our change management program a little bit over the course of this presentation talk about how innovation plays into that, and share a lot of the lessons learned and the things that need to be managed very closely. So if Transamerica is a quantum particle, it may have an antiparticle which is capable of annihilating it. I don't know if Amazon is that antiparticle, but you could imagine that there is a disruptor out there that's ready to take Transamerica and the whole life insurance industry out. 100 years of evidence suggests to me that the life insurance industry will not change. We still do all of our sales face-to-face over a kitchen table or at an agent's office. We still deliver our product by paper. What else do we do? We've got a lot of antiquated processes like that haven't changed. So despite all of the change in the last 20 years in the world, the life insurance industry has resisted it. And it's going to be up to a company like this to come along and say, wait a second, the consumers don't want a kitchen table agent selling them a piece of paper and then never to be heard from again. And that was the other thing I was going to mention. The other piece about life insurance companies is that they don't own their customers. So when we sell a product today, it's an agent delivering a product to a customer. In many cases, Transamerica does not even have the rights to talk to that customer after that transaction is made. So that's something we need to actively change, and that's one thing that I am taking on and fighting. When I got the title of Chief Innovation Officer, I started to get questions or more exclamations from people saying, we're doomed. What are we going to do when Amazon decides to start selling life insurance? Or what are we going to do when Google gets into the life insurance business? And for a while, I agreed with them. We are doomed, right? We can't compete digitally with these companies. We just have to kind of be ready. So when this does happen, when Amazon decides that they're going to do life insurance in a bigger and better way, we need to be there when it happens and be ready to partner and take advantage of that. The good thing is, what I've realized since then is that Amazon does not want to be in the life insurance business. The closer I get to the business of insurance and investments and retirement products, the more certain I am that Amazon does not want to be in those businesses. They're a distribution channel. And if we look at them that way, they could, instead of being the company that annihilates us, they could be the single biggest opportunity for the life insurance industry ever to present itself. So if we look at it that way, suddenly we start to get the whole organization ready for when Amazon decides to launch its life insurance portal, which I believe is on the way. So I'll talk a little bit about our Culture of Innovation program. We worked with a consultancy, Maddox Douglas out of Chicago, to work on this program. And really the benefit of the consultancy was to challenge the status quo. Beyond that, I'm not sure how much benefit there is, because what they were preaching was, you need to learn the lessons about your culture and respond to the lessons about your culture. The consultants did a good job of coaching and challenging us to take risks, but that was about it. And after that, it's about learning what you're up against and deciding what is the best way forward. The first phase of our Culture of Innovation effort was the assessment phase. It was a simple diagnostic, try to figure out where we are. And what we learned is that innovation is ambiguous. I went into rooms like this and asked employees, what is innovation? And everyone's hands shot up, and they all had different answers. It's creativity, it's change, it's positive impact, it's positive commercial impact, whatever it is. It's ambiguous. Also, innovation, what we found is our employees believe that innovation is that thing that happens somewhere else. Some other group is in charge of it. And then finally, we learned employees didn't recognize the need for the company to innovate because no one had given them rationale for why all these things were changing and where we were going. They don't have the know-how to be innovative, and they don't feel that they have the support to be innovative. And this makes executives really antsy because they say, I support all innovation. If anyone has a good idea, I let them do it. That's not true. There was no structures built to allow that type of energy to happen. So then we moved into change readiness phase and making change phase. I'll talk about those. And we have an aspirational state, and that's our sustainability. So this is where the culture, as a snowball that's packed very tight in the beginning and gets pushed down the hill, it starts to snowball out of control, and it becomes self-sustaining. And all the things we're putting in place don't require an innovation center pushing hard and trying to break the status quo. Instead, they kind of sustain themselves. So what that looks like is that innovation is still ambiguous. I don't think we're ever going to solve that. In fact, at every innovation conference I've ever been to, we're still debating the definition of innovation. So that will never be cured. But at least we can make it relatable to our employees and accessible to our employees. And in many cases, innovation games has been the key to doing that with our employees, making it very accessible. We need to shift, and this is a choice. This is not an imperative for any company, but the choice Transamerica is making is to shift from innovation is that thing that happens over there to innovation is everywhere. And I'll share the case for that in a little bit. And finally, where we want to go is that it's not, employees move from this place where they don't know what innovation is to this place ultimately where they are the ones leading the charge across all fronts on innovation. So a tall order, to say the least. So here's what we've learned in 3 years of our change management program. I wish I had had this slide up front. It would have saved a lot of pain and energy. But I talked about this. Innovation is very flexible. The definition is very flexible. It's one of the core benefits. It can relate to lots of different parts of the organization, but that can also present problems. If it is left unchecked, if you allow the definition of innovation to be flexible, it begins to become inconsistently understood. And the cynical employee will reject innovation because my definition is different than theirs. And if that's not managed very closely, they're going to say, oh, innovation's that thing that happens somewhere else, or they're going to just simply right out reject it. Secondly, innovation is very aspirational. Our culture of innovation is very aspirational. It's what we want to become. It's not a destination, but it's a journey. But as a result of it being aspirational, it's also unattainable. Everyone in our culture of innovation movement has been frustrated at every point in time. We're not changing fast enough. We're not changing well enough. We're not getting the business results we want, and that's never going to go away. So that needs to be managed very closely. By definition, a culture of innovation is unattainable. You're always going to push harder. It's also continuously improving. That's great. Continuous improvement's awesome. If every piece of our business is always improving, wonderful. But that requires someone to recognize that things are changing. When they're continuously improving, they're changing. And change, if not led, can be damaging for employee morale. You have to provide rationale for decisions. You have to involve employees in decisions that matter to them. If that's not done effectively, it can destroy everything you're trying to do. And finally, a culture of innovation is inclusive, which is great. We're trying to invite everyone in to be part of this. But it starts with just a few people, an innovation center of 6 people, and that's not sustainable. It's draining. There's not a lot of energy there. There's a lot of energy, but it's a scarce resource. Eventually, it has to be built so that it is sustainable, that we're not just asking someone to do something extra in their job, but that their job becomes innovation, and that's woven into the fabric. So as you can imagine, if we don't have great communication channels, if there's not a lot of two-way dialogue with the culture, with the employees, an employee sitting in their desk in Cedar Rapids or in Little Rock, Arkansas, or in St. Petersburg, Florida, might look at this culture of innovation thing and say, I have no idea what's going on. We're never going to get there. This is just the next thing. This change is really painful. I don't want to have an innovation space next to me, and it's going to go away in 2 months. That could very well be the reaction of our employees, and in fact, that's where we started. So we're trying to get past that. So how do we get past it? 2 simple things that I've found. First and foremost, successful innovation requires demystifying innovation for employees. If you make innovation, like I've said, relatable and accessible to employees, all of a sudden they're okay with that flexibility because you've given them a way to relate to it, and I'll talk about a tip or a trick that we did to do that. And the aspirational part's great, and if they know what they're trying to become, and that's demystified for them, we talk very regularly about where we are and where we're going, then you can overcome this barrier of someone rejecting it because it's unattainable and feeling frustrated. So that's the employees' part. They need to understand their role in innovation. That needs to be made clear to them. The second part, successful culture of innovation building requires a shift, a mindset shift to innovation leadership. And this is a tricky one. Innovation can't simply be led at the top. So the mindset shift to innovation leadership is a shift to every employee feeling accountable for leading innovation. And that's a very difficult mindset shift. But if every employee understands that they're accountable for coming up with an idea, for vetting the feasibility of that idea, building a case for that idea, and then figuring out how we're going to execute on it, that's the ideal state. And that requires each employee who's going to raise their hand and say, I have an idea, to be a leader and an owner of that idea. I like to say, no one will love your idea more than you. So tossing an idea into a suggestion box and hoping that the leadership at the top executes that idea is simply not an effective, sustainable framework. And as a result, we have never built a division-wide suggestion box. I don't want employee ideas. I don't want them coming across my desk. I want the employee to own it. And in fact, I get a lot of them reaching out saying, hey, I want to do this. And I turn the question on them, so how could we? What would it look like if you ran that? And pretty soon they're running with that idea. And that's the idea of innovation leadership. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So demystifying for employees. We set off on a journey to create an environment ready for change, and it was a very painful one. In 2013, we set off and conducted what we called Culture of Innovation Cafes. We traveled to each and every one of our life and protection sites and visited with our 6,000 employees. We invited them to a 4-hour session to come share their ideas about what would make Transamerica an environment where innovation can flourish. And that idea completely backfired on us. So these were employees that have never been asked for their opinion before. This is the first time they've been asked to be part of direction setting, and they threw up all over us. So instead of getting great ideas like, we should build an innovation station or an innovation lab, or I need different compensation, we got, I don't know why the guy next to me got fired, or I'm scared of raising my hand because I'm going to be the next one fired. That's the type of feedback that we got. There was no ideation. There was no solutions presented. We dug up the problems. After 4 hours of going through that with a room full of 600 employees in some cases, the ray of light in the forest, in the scary forest of change, was when we asked for volunteers. So who wants to help us on this journey of innovation? And up shot 200 hands. So even though they didn't understand what it was, they didn't understand where we were going, it was really ambiguous, we hadn't defined it for them, they're still willing to get on board. Innovation's a ray of light for them. They hadn't heard anything other than bad news for 3 years, and this was the first time someone was standing in front of them saying, we can be innovative. And they started to believe, even though they were throwing up all over me. So here's a little bit of what we did. So in the Change Readiness Program, this was 2013 really, we did this Culture of Innovation tour. I can't pretend that that's the right thing for any of your companies to do. Really, it's about understanding what your culture is, what it needs to be, and trying to design. It's like the Lego movie. Emmett in the Lego movie didn't have any directions, and he was best when he didn't have any directions, when he had to take just what he had and build from there. We had to build the awareness of the need. We did that through the culture of innovation, through new communications. We had to find and enlist employees as allies in the change, and their hands went up. And we enlisted, out of our 6,000 employees, 125 innovation ambassadors in that first year at various locations, and involved them in the change and allowed them to enlist others and start that snowball rolling. We defined innovation as a competency for the business rather than a thing that happens somewhere else, and began to ask, what would it take for us to be innovative? And again, this is the first time they've ever had that conversation. So they started to see that something different was happening, and that's a really cool thing. And then we measured. At every step along the way, we measure. So every year, we have a really robust culture of innovation survey where we ask how you're feeling about certain things. Can you contribute ideas? Do you feel that we're collaborative? And we measure that every year. This year was the year of making change, and this is where Innovation Games was the hit of 2014 for Transamerica. We wanted to create engaging programs to improve the know-how for employees on how to innovate. And Innovation Games came to the rescue, and I'll share some of the stats a little bit later, and really move the needle this year on our survey on know-how. We wanted to improve capabilities and develop innovation standards, and my department is a big piece of that. So the Insights and Innovation Department within Transamerica is that capability improvement center. It It is a centers of excellence strategy around innovation, market research, advanced analytics, and soon to be customer advocacy. And all those things being centralized can then flow out into the organization, and we can continue to push and connect people to those things. We wanted to make sure we were showing demonstrable support, and so I showed up a lot of places this year. I think I racked up something like 50,000 frequent flyer miles in Southwest alone, just trying to get out there and helping people relate to innovation, and finally measuring the impact of change again. So to demystify, I borrowed a notion from Peter Drucker, who's a famous management author and thinker. And it's a definition of innovation that makes it relatable and accessible for employees. And it's that innovation is the core competency for dealing with the everyday aggressive pace of change. If you frame innovation up like that, all of a sudden, employees can grab on to what it means for them in their roles. A common stressor among employees is change. And if they can relate innovation as the antidote to that stress, that's a really cool thing. We need to demystify innovation, not just as ideation, because that's what a lot of people associate it with, and not as invention, because that's what the rest of people associate it with, but really as a business discipline. And then position this definition as a call to action. It's more than just a definition that we float out there, but asking everyone to identify change factors that they face, evaluate the response options every time they face a change factor, and then actually go ahead and make a decision on how they're going to respond. That's innovation. Now, the way that innovation gets better is to ask yourself some deeper questions. What traits are required to respond to the aggressive pace of change that you face in your work or your team's work? Are you creative enough? Do you have enough influence? Do you need more learning agility, adaptability, collaboration, research, expertise, experimentation, inspiration? I bet each and every one of you can think of something that your team is not good enough at on that list. I took this to a CFA conference in Transamerica, so they were doing continuing education credits for the financial analyst track, and we did an innovation thing. And they all started writing when I shared this down, and a lot of them approached afterwards and said, okay, yeah, I want to be more creative. How do I do that? We need to learn more about what's going on in the industry. How do we do that? So this connected innovation to folks who have never seen anything innovative, right? They're dealing with actuarial tables. So then they need to build their plan for being innovative when pressured by change factors, and that could be just simply trying to figure out what's it going to take for me or my team or my department to be more creative. What's it going to take for us to be more influential, agile, collaborative, whatever it is. Actually building out a plan, saying in the next year, I'm going to get 5 people trained on innovation games. In the next year, I'm going to do this and that. And then finally, the most important piece is actually acting on this. And if you don't act on it, it was all just lip service. So I've been taking this to some of the leaders, and they've been doing this. I'm trying to institutionalize it a little bit more. But I feel it's a really good way for anyone in any organization to relate to innovation because they all feel change pressures. All right, so the next success factor I talked about was this mindset shift to innovation leadership. I selected this picture very deliberately, and it's because there's something very interesting about it. If you look at the people in this picture, you cannot identify who the leader is at this table. In fact, they all seem relatively engaged, focused on the same thing, and collaborating on something. And here's my other physics analogy. This generally doesn't happen in nature. Entropy suggests that we have a tendency towards disorder, not towards order. This requires someone to create this situation. The person that created this situation flexed a muscle called leadership. They created the space for employees to get together and collaborate and share ideas and work on a business problem. That does not happen in the absence of leadership. Now, granted, there are a few people out there who have entrepreneurial spirits that will do this, and they'll find people who are like-minded. But generally, when your goals are to manage your day-to-day business, collaboration is not going to happen automatically. It needs to be led. So, believe it or not, I'm a bit of an introvert. Now, Laura kind of tipped that off when she said I like to go into the woods for weeks at a time by myself. When I first got this gig as Chief Innovation Officer, it scared me to death. I thought that I would be able to do this in a grassroots capacity, connecting with people that I know and like and build it up from there. but instead it had to be at a really high energy level, doing presentations like this. And I'll admit, this type of presentation drains me, completely drains me. I'll go back and crash tonight, because that's the introverted nature of me. Doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means that it's not what excites me. It's not what gets me going. But I had to learn that lesson, that innovation needs to be led. And leadership isn't going to happen by itself. I had a coach in 2013 who challenged me to be the change I want to see, which is a paraphrase of a famous Gandhi quote. She said, before your first Culture of Innovation Cafe next week, well, let me back up. I had this reputation in the office of the person that walks into the office every day, goes to my corner office, closes the door. I'm on conference calls all day. At the end of the day, I open my door for air and walk out and go to my car and go home. There was a rumor that there was people within my 20-foot diameter of my office that I didn't know their name. I didn't know what they did, what department they were working in. And rumors are generally at least partly based on truth. So my coach had heard this rumor, and she challenged me. She said, before you get up in front of that stage, I need you to be the change you want to see. If you're going to ask people to go out and behave differently, you need to do it yourself. Go out and meet someone, meet that woman that you don't know, and find 3 things that you have in common with her. At that moment, every nerve and cell in my body resisted this conversation. I wanted to hang up the phone. So I started coming up with excuses. I said, well, in fact, I'm not going to be in the office again before then. I am going to Texas before I'm going to Los Angeles. Simply not going to work. And she quickly pivoted and said, okay, meet someone in the Texas office who you don't know, that you should know, and find something you have in common with them. And I said, well, there's simply not going to be enough time for that. I'm only there for a day. I've got flights. I've got all these things. Every excuse she had a counter. And so finally I resigned and said, okay, I'll do it. And I fly off to Texas, and as soon as I got there, I started raising a ruckus. I walked up to my friend Shelly, and I said, Shelly, listen, I have to do this thing. I need to meet someone I don't already know, who I probably should know, and find 3 things I have in common with them. And Shelly said to me, you need to meet Dana Litton. And I said, I don't know Dana Litton, so let me try someone else. And I walked up to my friend Lori, and I said, Lori, I need to meet someone here in Texas that I don't know, 20-minute conversation, find 3 things I have in common. Who would you suggest? She said, Dana Litton. And so I hemmed and hawed all morning long. By the time I went to Dana Litton's cube, she knew very well I was coming. And I sat down with Dana and started to talk to her. She was very agreeable to this conversation. And I started to find some things I had in common with Dana. Dana and I both had math backgrounds, both had 2 degrees in math, in fact. So that was cool, and we could talk about math. We found that we had both moved our families or our significant others to a foreign city or a city foreign to us for our jobs, and we were able to commiserate a little bit in there, share about some of the stress of not having family nearby. It turns out Dana had been working on some of the project work that I had initiated, and I had no idea that she was working for me in any capacity whatsoever. So we talked about some of that project work. And here's the kicker. It turns out Dana's husband works at the same company that my wife works at. So we even though we're in 8 states away, we were able to talk about that. So meet Dana Litton. We're still a little awkward math people, forgive that. Yeah, thank you. So, Dana's a very good friend of mine now. She works for me in my department. She has been one of our innovation ambassadors and has been a key piece of organizational feedback for me. She's a trusted advisor, and it's really cool that I built that relationship with her. And I would not have done that without being the change that I was preaching and being the change that I wanted to see. But if I can do it, you can do it. So right now I'm going to ask that you stand up, find someone in this room that you don't know, find 2 things you have in common and 1 way that you can help each other. We'll give you just a few minutes to do this. Probably running a little bit against my time, so 3 minutes. Take 3 minutes to do this. Funny little story while you're making your way back. I went to undergraduate with my high school sweetheart, and we were in the same orientation class together just by chance, and we had to do a similar exercise to this, and we cheated. We pretended like we didn't know each other, and introduced each other in front of the room and did all that. So I hope none of you cheated. That's probably why our relationship didn't work out. It was built on a bed of lies about each other, and that, among other reasons, that I won't get into here. So, lesson, be the change you want to see. If you want people to collaborate effectively, meet different people, Luke talked about it. Do that thing that makes you scared, right? Get out there and tackle that thing that's so far removed from what you're doing today that it's going to change you as a person. And that's actually just the lesson of empowerment. When you take on tasks that you don't know that you can do, but everyone else knows that you can do them, you start to feel that you can do those things, and that's a lesson of empowerment. So the last thing I'll share on this leadership mindset is I found a really cool paper from McKinsey that was published in 2008, which is all about traits of a culture of innovation. And when I was reading through it, and this is kind of as I was gearing up for the job, I was expecting to see, okay, we need to have a Silicon Valley Innovation Laboratory, we need to have cool spaces and all sorts of stuff, and we need to have people who are in charge of innovation, and none of that came out in this paper. The traits of a culture of innovation are human. They are not organizational. They're not things that you can buy or design. They're things that we all know intrinsically, but we avoid because they're human things and they're hard. They're the ideas of involving employees in decisions that matter to them. Too often in corporate America, we just simply make a decision and we think it's the right one. But if you collaborate and invite people in, as you all know as innovation games experts, you're going to get an incredibly different result on whatever your business problem is when you involve them in decisions that matter than you would if you didn't do that. Make an environment that's safe to learn from failure. That's a leadership lesson. If you have employees who are taking risks and failing on them, coach them. Create that environment. Be open to new ideas. I come from a culture, I worked at Capital One for many years, and at Capital One, what we always said was, every person in the room thinks they're the smartest person in the room, and there was no openness to new ideas. And it was a very toxic culture. It evolved into a toxic culture as a result. I think they're trying to overcome that a little bit. But in a culture of innovation, you have to be open. You can't assume that you're the smartest person in the room. You have to assume that someone else has different experience, better experience, more relevant experience, and will have a better idea than you. And you have to be willing to experiment and take risks. But what really got me is the quote in the middle, to make a corporate culture friendlier to innovation. Managers or the leaders of people and things and processes, they need to acquire new skills of coaching, facilitating collaboration across silos. And doing that stuff for Transamerica is what has unlocked our culture of innovation. We can throw millions of dollars into skunk works innovation, we can build laboratories, we can build innovation spaces, but this is the meat and potatoes of it all. This is what makes the culture move. So over the course of the last 2 years, for leaders, which again I defined as everybody who is in a culture of innovation should be a leader, we started to align various leaders to the case for change. So the people who were up in the front, they needed to know that innovation was important and how to do it. We needed to build new leadership muscles around creating space for collaboration, creating space for creativity, and having a trusting atmosphere. We had to have visible leadership promoting readiness, so we designed discussions with leadership into day-to-day operations, into our employee meetings. We took a lot of leadership risks and created little panels. We have an executive innovation team, for instance, that comes back and talks about the risk that they took and what they learned and how it was different than what they did in the past. This year, we've been connecting innovation leaders to resources and capabilities, the market research capabilities and the advanced analytics capabilities I talked about, creating more space, not just physical space, but time and support for creativity and collaboration. We're doing a lot of storytelling and setting consistent language and dialogue, and obviously measuring everything every step along the way. So where does that lead us? If innovation is a destination, you can probably buy your way there. You can invest a lot into R&D, and you may get back many times more your investment. You may get what you were looking for. But if you try to build a culture of innovation, it becomes more of a journey and less a destination. You begin to have incremental improvements all across your business, and you don't run the risk of investing your entire business into a technology or a platform or something that's going to be obsolete as soon as someone else with a better culture of innovation comes along and crushes you, which is the case with both RIM and Palm, unfortunately. So I do have a video. How are we doing on time? Good? All right. So I have a video on how Innovation Games has played a part, and let me tee it up a little bit. I talked about how geographically we are very dispersed as Transamerica, and we had a lot of organizational change over the last several years. What happens with org change is that bridges are burned, but new bridges are not constructed. And that's, again, a human thing. But when you lose your lawyer due to a reorg, you actually have to pick up the phone and call a lawyer you know and say, hey, I need a new lawyer for my business. Can you help me figure this out? But that stuff doesn't happen. And particularly as you move outside of that core network that you need to get things done into that secondary network, you start to not know who's there and who to rely upon. So Innovation Games has given us that platform at Transamerica to collaborate more effectively, and I'll share a summary video. You may recognize some of the folks in this video.
So I'm Mandy Seelman with the Innovation Center, and I work with Terry Matheny, and we work on commercializing ideas. And it's no secret that Transamerica has a ton of ideas. I think it's also safe to say that a lot of people don't know what to do with ideas or how to start acting on them. So Terry and I will facilitate brainstorming sessions and help people figure out how to digest the problems that they're trying to tackle or achieve the end goals that they're looking for with their projects. And we facilitate these brainstorming sessions and play games, and a lot of times it's so fun because people think that they're having fun and playing games, and then they step back and they look at what we did today and they're shocked at how productive of a day it was and how good they feel about their project moving forward.
We've been struggling to get a good understanding of what the business needs were from the Affinity Group on the product availability solution. And we've been working with them in bits and pieces over the past few months to try to get a good understanding of that. Just in 2 days, we've moved the project forward by leaps and bounds. And in 2 days, we're able to get a good understanding of better understanding of the business, where we had never really worked with Affinity prior to this. So that was a good jumping off point for us.
In the first game we played was Remember the Future. In Remember the Future, we have the room describe visually and in writing what their end result is going to be. In this case, it was a software or a website that they're going to build at the end of this. So we asked them to describe in pictures and words, what will that final website look like? Then we took the information from that and we started breaking that down using Product Tree or Build Your Orchard. And Build the Orchard, everything in the tree, and we used red apples to say, for this website to occur, what do we have to have? The leaves represented the likes to haves. So if we could have anything we wanted in this website, what would that be? And then on the ground we had, what would kill this project? What would make it be a failure? So if this occurred as we were building it, what would that be? The group did an incredible job in this exercise.
This is the first time I've ever attended one of the Innovation Games. And to be quite honest, I didn't really know what to expect coming in. You hear the terminology of games, and the first concern I have is, is it all going to be bonding information and we're not really going to get into anything serious? But what we found is that we made a tremendous amount of progress in a 2-day period for a huge project that we're trying to scope out that has been stuck for a while, at odds with terminology and kind of the base understanding. And by getting the group together face-to-face for a 2-day period, we were able to create a baseline understanding between both groups, have a little bit of fun, and actually really come up with some solutions to move forward.
Instead of having the mentality that this is what we've always done, this is how we do this, or we can't do this, we have a lot of games that facilitate them kind of thinking outside of the box and putting no limitations on them. So with everybody in the room and working on this project on both sides of the teams and accomplishing and identifying the milestones and having a very clear outcome, we were able to work on team dynamics and build the team. This is the first time that a lot of them have gotten together. And they're also feeling a lot of ownership and accountability, and like their voices are heard. So they all are feeling pretty empowered, and the energy level in there is pretty great today.
The first day, I felt like there was a big connection and a lot of clarity between one, what the business problem is, and then two, how the affinity distribution channel works at a high level. I have more clarity with that, and being able to meet face-to-face the people that I will be working with on this project.
Because of the innovation games, we were able to identify certain specific areas that other teams needed more information or more details about. We analyzed roadblocks, we looked at strengths, we looked at benefits, and we really strategized on how to move this large initiative forward. And I really don't think we could have did that without the creative collaboration of the innovation games and the facilitators actually making us get up and actively participate in the ideation and solution process. The neutral facilitators actually helped us all look at this from a different perspective that I don't think we would have gotten at different sites or on the phone.
The IT group, which is the group that's going to have to go away and actually do the build, they're going to have to estimate the job and do the build. We're trying to communicate with a group that had no idea what they were going through. So this exercise came a long way to bringing those two together and understanding, number one, what is the product implementation group's requirements and how IT was going to translate those requirements into an estimate and an actual website.
I feel like we absolutely needed this, and I really don't know what else we would have done if we hadn't done the innovation games. After this, I feel like we can move forward and we can begin developing the estimate that's needed to do the presentation to executive management.
And so this was a way to get us together and really get a jump start in moving forward to what we need to do in order to provide a cost-benefit analysis and understanding the scope of what we're going to build in order to solve the business problem and be prepared to present this to our executive review board for approval.
We've played many games. We've played Product Tree, we've played Concept Fan, we've played a round of Speedboat, and the outcome from that is going to help the group go away, build a case for building this new technology, as well as justification for building it, and help them in the development of the system itself.
I absolutely feel that we needed this. Again, I think you had two sets of different groups that were working very hard to get towards an end. And we just came to a point in time where we seemed to get gridlocked. We couldn't make any additional progress. And getting the groups together face to face and creating that personal connection, getting an understanding of what our needs are, what the other group's needs are, and collaborating together, we've made tremendous strides in a 2-day period that we've been probably stuck on for the last 3 to 4 weeks.
The group has been incredible in growing into a refined team that I feel when they walk away from here will be able to reach out to one another to complete whatever it is this project leads them to complete. I did say one time that I don't think I've had a meeting where I couldn't get people to take a break, and I could not get these people to take a break. It was great. I think they all enjoyed it so much.
I really think that the innovative games that we've used these 3 days to get to where we are have really been essential and really been one of the primary reasons that we've been able to get the information and build that rapport and relationship with each other in order to move this forward.
I do feel now that we can move forward together with this project. A lot of what we have to do at this point in time is compile some detailed information and get ready for a formalized presentation. We could not have done that without this 2-day session, and I'm confident that as a group we're going to be able to move forward.
Tomorrow we will work on prioritizing the ideas and data dumping and collecting everything that has come out of this ideation session. We'll also make sure that both sides are very clear on the action items that are next and how to move forward with the project.
It's very important to go in with an open mind to these types of innovation games. There's a tremendous amount to be gained out of them if you come in with the right mindset and you're willing to open yourself up to collaborate and to really listen to others.
I think the company is telling us that they need somebody to come in and help them organize and design these meetings. They're not easy to design, but they're so rewarding, and whoever attends them gets so much out of them.
This has been posted on our intranet site, I believe. Maybe not yet, or it will be. Real exciting for us to have that opportunity. Some of the folks on that, when I joined the company in 2007, there were some of the folks on that who I thought were really stiff people that would never survive this transformation to a culture of innovation. Andy Erb and Sandy Rohr, and they're now leading the charge. And that is exactly what we were trying to accomplish with the change to a culture of innovation. So just a couple more things here, and then I'll open it up for questions. The games themselves we've made available on our intranet site. This is what it looks like. All of our employees have access to join. We trap them a little bit. They have to join our Life and Protection Innovation community in order to have access to this page. So that's where we start to understand who are the people that are really interested and motivated by innovation. They can come here and learn all about the tools. They can drill down into each one of these, see how the offline environment works, see how the online environment works. They can get a list of all of our trainers that they can call upon. They can find out more information, as you can see in the bottom, about the training sessions that are coming up. Been a really cool success. It's been in existence for, a month now, maybe a month and a half? So really cool that we've been able to launch that. And here's the numbers. And the numbers really speak for themselves. In just 5 training sessions, this is what we've been able to generate. And the 497 number there is only those games that we've been able to count. There are countless others. So we are well over the 500, probably 750 range of games played. I had a chance to present at our Baltimore all-employee meeting last week, and I asked the question, how many people in this room have played an innovation game? 1 year ago, no hands would have gone up. And this year, about 70% of the room raised their hands and said, I know what that is and I have played one. So really cool way to engage employees in the culture of innovation. So that does it. That's everything I had. Any questions? Thank you. Yeah.
So this is a real threat on middle management player. Because that power being eroded because now instead of giving direction and telling people what to do, people going out there and creating self-forming teams for emerging. So how do you cope with that?
Yeah, the question's about middle management, and in fact, that's one of the most cited barriers to innovation is the middle management layer. So they may feel threatened by this movement to a culture of innovation, but it's warranted because they're also identified as the barriers. However, what we've learned, and we've studied it intimately now, is that while everyone says or believes that middle management is the number one barrier to innovation, when we go on the witch hunt, no one names names, right? Everyone believes their manager is really open to new ideas and is supportive of innovation, but they would look across their departments and say, but middle management is the problem. I truly believe that middle management's not the problem, they're more of the solution. So I don't think, if they are able to adjust their mindset, and that's the shift from traditional leadership to innovation leadership, which is all about learning, asking questions, inviting people in, they're probably more capable at getting the right people in the room than someone below them would be. So they have to recognize that that's their role in innovation, is to get the right people into the room, set up the conditions for the conversation, and make sure the conversation is acted upon when they get out of that room. And that's the new way that middle managers are going to be effective. Yeah, I don't think we'll get to the holacracy point that Luke made before.
We're going to walk around with microphones, so raise your hand and we'll bring you one.
I wanted to ask, if you were playing Remember the Future and you had to think of when you knew that you had achieved the tipping point, that the innovation was starting to take root and it wouldn't stop, what happened just before that to make that happen? How did you know?
All right, so how did I know that the tipping point was about to happen? I'm scared every day that all the momentum that we've created is going to unravel somehow. And I don't think I'm ever going to sleep easy thinking that we've accomplished. And that's, I talked about the unattainable nature of a culture of innovation. I'm always frustrated by the pace of change. I don't think, and Terry knows this, I don't think that there's ever going to be a time where I can sit back and really admire the work that we've done. It's nice to be able to reflect upon it, but resting here and disconnecting all of the energy that we've created from the employees at any point in time could threaten the whole thing, and the morale could unravel. It needs to be managed, and needs to be managed closely going forward. So I don't know that I've reached that point where I'm really comfortable with where we are. I've had a couple kind of red letter moments. One was the first time we met with the Culture of Innovation consultants. They asked me to bring with me the head of HR for Life and Protection. It was a person I didn't know. And my reaction was, no way, I'm not bringing that person. I don't know who that person is, because we were so disconnected, right? I'm scared that they're going to do things in the name of innovation that I don't support, that aren't designed, they're not part of the program. And I was coached to believe, and now I do believe it, that that's the best possible scenario, is when the culture of innovation is out of your control, that's when you know you've succeeded. When there's ambassadors at every level of the organization and every function and every location who are continuing to toe the line to get us to be more innovative, that's when we've succeeded. So I'm seeing some of that. I'm never going to rest, though.
Sharing your story has been really wonderful to hear, because we're so early on in our journey at our company. Something I'd love to learn about or hear about a little bit more is this notion of beyond the numbers. What kinds of impact have you seen in terms of your employee engagement, in terms of the impact on product, in terms of impact on results, or your customers? Yeah, so a question about measurements, and we certainly do a lot. We've measured a lot more on the cultural side than we have on the business results side. And that's a bit of a function of what a culture of innovation is. Since it's not an innovation center that all innovation needs to funnel through, it's really difficult to even name what is innovative. And it's difficult to then understand what is the cost of that thing and what's the return on that thing. We're struggling with that piece right now, the business returns. But on the cultural side, we've seen huge, huge movement. Now, we started at a very low level. When we started, 1 out of every 6 of the employees that we had in Life and Protection felt the need for change, felt that they were supported, and felt that they had the know-how to go about being innovative. 1 out of 6. The next year, that jumped up to 1 out of 4, and this year, it's jumped up to 1 out of 3. So it's going to be a slow pace of change, and we want to be 4 out of 5, right? We want to know 80% of our employees are awesome, and they're innovating all the time. But another physics analogy, you can only realize the potential that you've created. So there's only so much potential energy that we're creating in the system. We create new structures, and that creates new potential energy. The employees need to fill that with kinetic energy. So when we build a new compensation structure, for instance, it can only move the culture so far. The whole culture is not going to shift. So every little thing that we do is just making a small incremental change. We just need to make sure we keep measuring it.
Can you talk to the one thing you said about safe to learn from failure? What actions, what things have you done to kind of have that tangibly realized?
Yeah.
In the culture, if you will.
one particular example is with our CEO. The CEO, Scott Hamm, he is a football player. He's got a football mentality, which is win, always win, right? We are winning, and if we're failing, we're losing. Shifting his mentality and his perspective. It had to start with him not believing what he was doing, but just acting and saying things like, we tried and we failed, and he needed coaching to do that. He's starting to do it more and more. I'm still not sure he truly believes that failure is okay, and we need to continue to work on that. But he's supportive now of initiatives that fail. He's out there advertising initiatives that we've tested that may or may not get off the ground, and he's saying, it's okay that this didn't get off the ground. Look at these 3 people who took a risk and went out and did this. So he's starting to believe it, and that's where I think it needs to start, is at the top, and folks showing support for initiatives that aren't necessarily knocking it out of the park.
My question's around training facilitators. Do you do that internally with your own team? What is the criteria to become a trainer? And how do you support people when they're in that journey to become facilitators themselves?
Yeah, I'll try to answer this, but Terry, do you want to answer it? She's in a better position than me.
We're currently bringing Continuo in to do formal training for us, and then we do ongoing support. Mandy is the princess of online, so if you're doing an online game, they can call either one of us, but we give personal support. We'll go in and facilitate it for them the first time, coach them through it, we'll observe them doing it, but we're always ready to be in the room with them or do it for them until they're comfortable in doing for them. They're not all great facilitators, but we have found some great facilitators. But that's how we're doing it, just one person at a time.
Hi, Erin, thank you very much for sharing your story. I found it truly inspirational, to be honest, because we are quite early in our journey, and it's just made me feel that the impossible is possible. So thank you for that. My question is very much around your ambassadors, and it's interesting to hear how many of them volunteered to be an ambassador. And I'm interested in how you keep them engaged to make sure that you don't lose that momentum. They're clearly a key part of the success to date.
Yeah, the ambassador program is one. It's a problem that we created, and we don't have all the answers. We realize that the commitment the ambassadors are giving is above and beyond the commitment of every other employee that does it. We ask them to donate 4 to 8 hours of their time without any structure built in for their managers to support that, for their departments to recognize it. These were the folks who were willing to put in a few hours at the end of the day. And what we realized it's simply not sustainable when that's the program, when it's a volunteer program. It's people who are really passionate want to debate things, and they would go all night if you let them debate all night long. And there was a lot of burnout at first, and there still is. There's a lot of burnout, but we're trying to shift that from burnout to turnover and design programs that refresh the ambassador community. We've got, 9 ambassador teams, I think. We've asked them to be self-governed. So one thing we're not doing is saying this is the way to run an ambassador team, which is good and bad. Where it's been good is in these instances of turnover and allowing them to realize to really kind of inquire what's causing the turnover in their specific group, what's the new type of ambassador that they want to bring in, and what's going to be their process for populating that. Dana Litton, who I shared before, actually volunteered to step down from the ambassador program this year because she felt that her ambassador team needed different types of people. And so we're training them, they're becoming very self-aware. But the key is going to be building, let me use the term service level agreements. So we've got a lot of our operational groups that have to adhere to very strict service level agreements. And today, building time to be an innovation ambassador is not in their service level agreements. So they are struggling with getting out of their day-to-day job to contribute in any meaningful capacity. My goal in 2015 is to make sure that changes so that every department, every team, every division has this idea of being ambassadors for innovation built into their DNA and the way they measure results. And I think that's going to be the key to its sustainability. But it's going to be measured at the very local level, actually, and responded to it at a local level.
I have a question. It seems like you've really changed the culture and you're part of the business and by playing games and having ambassadors all over. Are you looking, and maybe this isn't your role, but are you looking at other parts of Transamerica to then move this culture into all of the different businesses?
Yeah, so the question is about moving the culture across all of Transamerica. Even Aegon is interested in what we're doing. The answer is definitely yes. Our employees are bombarded with mixed messages of identity from Aegon, from Transamerica, from their business division, from their department, from their sub-teams. There's always these different imperatives and mixed messages going on. We're trying to consolidate that down. In fact, Laura mentioned my new title, Chief Customer Advocate. That's going to be the common thread among all of our cultural activities, is being customer advocates. And in the course of doing so, innovation is a tool for responding to the needs that our customers are sharing with us. It's no longer the cultural pillar that maybe we were thinking it was going to be. Instead, customer advocacy might be the one that is so common that we can push it out across the entire landscape. So we are getting a new C-suite in place around customer advocacy, and that's going to be at every level of the organization. We're trying to make that the common thread, and we'll see how it goes. It's going to be another change program just like this one, unfortunately. But we'll never be done changing.
Are there any other questions? I had one. I noticed in the video that many of the Transamerica employees were holding balls in their hands. Is that because of the culture of the athletic nature of your CEO, or why were we holding balls when we were talking?
Magic 8-ball. So, I like to say innovation's not just Rubik's Cubes and Skittles, but that's a piece of it, at least. You need to have the stuff in the middle of the table that you're grabbing onto, and that's freeing up your right brain for creativity. And it helps them in the video not look too unnatural.
Very good. So. Any other questions?
If you were to do one thing over again, what would you do with all this hindsight? What would you do differently if you were to do it differently?
I, by nature, like to do things very grassroots, establish relationships with people who I know are like-minded and are going to help me in my cause. I would have found the detractors earlier and worked on selling them on the benefits of a culture of innovation. Some of them are still out there, and they're in leadership positions, and they are causing a lot of angst. And I should have addressed that very early on. So figure out who are the detractors in your program, and align them, help them, create a shared vision with them. Try to help them understand how it could be beneficial to them and get them involved. Still working on how to do that.
Okay, well, Aaron, thank you so much. That was really fantastic.
My pleasure.